Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to make a case for physical media once again. And this time we're going to talk about the brandly new released The Crow on 4K. I got the steelbook here. That's what the steelbook looks like on the front. On the back you got Eric Draven walking in the rain. And with the slipcover on, you can see Eric's face in the crow's wing there. And I got to watch this the other night. It's the first time I watched this in a couple years. But I was excited about the 4K, And we'll talk about the transfer net. We're just going to go down some information on The Crow and I'm going to give you my score on this. I've never reviewed this film, and it's a film I've seen many times over the years, though. The Crow came out May 13th of 1994. It's rated R. It's an hour and 42 minutes long. Had a budget of $23 million, and upon release, it made 50 in America and 94 worldwide. Now, this is based on an independent comic by James O'Barr, and Alex Proyas came in to direct this film. And in this film, we got Brandon Lee, which we have a lot to discuss about him with this film, notoriously, playing Eric Draven. And Brandon was just coming off of Showdown in Little Tokyo in 91 and Rapid Fire 92, which Rapid Fire, and I like both of those films, but Rapid Fire is a really kick-ass little R-rated action movie if you've never seen it, directed by Dwight Little. Powers Booth in that movie. If you've never seen it, check it out. It's a pretty fun action film. The great Michael Wincott is in this film as Top Dollar. He's the leader of this crime organization, a crime syndicate in Detroit. We got Ernie Hudson playing a police officer in this film, and Ernie Hudson's always great whenever he's on screen. We got David Patrick Kelly as T-Bird. He is a part of this little crew that works for Top Dollar, and David Patrick Kelly's been in a ton of films, The Warriors, Commando, bunch of other stuff, been around for a long time. Michael Massey plays Fun Boy. He is a part of T-Bird's little crew, and the great Tony Todd is in this film as well, and he works directly for Top Dollar in this film. And The Crow pretty much starts off with, we set up with Eric Draven and his fiance about to be married on Halloween Day get killed by these punks in their apartment. True love brings Eric back, or The Crow brings Eric back to take revenge and right the wrongs of what was done to them. And that is pretty much The Crow. Eric comes back and starts taking these guys out one by one, and he ends up crossing paths with Top Dollar. And at the end of the film, we get this great last fight between Top Dollar and Eric Draven, and Eric dispatches of Top Dollar, and he's able to rest once again with the love of his life. And that is pretty much The Crow. What to like about this film? Well, Brandon Lee as Eric Draven is fantastic. The whole cast is great here. And, Brandon Lee's awesome, obviously, and we'll talk about the tragedy that happened on the set of this film, sadly. Everybody's great, though, but Michael Wincott, for how great, Brandon Lee is as Eric Draven, the main villain, Michael Wincott, is deliciously evil in this film. I love his performance here. Michael Wincott's always great whenever he's on screen, and he's great here as well. So is everybody. Like I said, the whole cast is great here. But between Brandon Lee and Michael Wincott, this movie is a winner chicken dinner. I mean, Ernie Hudson's great. He brings a warmth and caring to the role of this police officer who tried to help Eric was already dead. His fiance was still alive, is in the hospital for a little bit before she passed. And Ernie Hudson always brings, when he plays good guys, he always brings that warmth to any role he ever does, and he's great here. Alex Proyas does a great job. I mean, this brings the gothic aesthetic, and he does a great job. This was all shot in Wilmington, about 2 hours from where I sit. A lot of it was shot on sets. They had issues. This film was plagued with issues. Some of their sets caught fire. They had issues throughout production. People were getting hurt. Then obviously the big shocker was Brandon Lee getting killed. Positive wise, I really like this film. It's really well done. And rewatching it in 4K, by the way, the transfer on this 4K is great, and it sounds great as well. This film's never looked better than it does on this disc right here. And it's definitely worth an upgrade. I'll say that up front. And there's special features ported over from the old Blu-ray. And there's a new documentary with the production designer. And, I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but it seemed like a really cool documentary. But yeah, if you like The Crow, this is definitely worth an upgrade. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, Brandon Lee the accident on set. Brandon Lee, they were going Fun Boy. This is when Brandon or Eric Draven comes into the apartment and Fun Boy goes to shoot him. Well, the gun was mishandled. It was, I'm not going to get into details, but there was a projectile stuck in the gun. When Michael Massey, who played Fun Boy, pulled the trigger, it shot like a regular bullet, went into Brandon Lee's stomach. He was rushed to the hospital, but sadly, he passed away from his injuries. Way too young, had a long career ahead of him. I mean, if you see the movies Brandon Lee's been in, all of them, he's great in every movie he's been in. And it's a shame his life, number one, his most important thing, his life was cut short, and his career. Brandon Lee died in the hospital on March 31st of 1993. And to finish the film, Paramount Pictures was the original studio backing the movie. When Brandon Lee passed away, they dropped the movie. Miramax stepped in, gave them an additional $8 million to finish shooting what they needed to finish shooting. Now, according to everybody involved, Brandon Lee had shot most of his scenes for the film. So what they did was, none other than Chad Stahelski, who directed the John Wick franchise and been a stuntman forever, he was a stuntman on this, he was Brandon Lee's double. So any shot you don't see Eric Draven's face, where they're hiding his face on purpose, and there's scenes that are pretty obvious for trying not to show his face, that's just Chad Stahelski standing there for Brandon Lee, because this was after he was killed. And then they used some digital augmentation to put Brandon Lee's face on his face. Now, the one drawback to 4K, and I love 4K, I think it makes films look amazing, better than they've ever looked. Unfortunately, some of that 90s CGI, especially for a lower budgeted film, although it's had a decent budget, but still, the CGI, it sticks out like a sore thumb in 4K. So that's the one thing about 4K. The clarity really does show the flaws in some of that earlier stage CGI. So when watching this, the face replacement scenes, there are not many of them, but when they show them, it's obvious that it's a floating head of a digital head of Brandon Lee over somebody else's body. So yeah, that's the story. I'm not going to get into specific details, all over online if you want to read specifically what happened to Brandon Lee. It's just such a shame. But they went ahead and they finished the movie. They released it, and it's been, has a strong following. And I know lots of people that love this film. And, I know they remade it. We'll see how that one turns out with Bill Skarsgård coming up in, I think, August it comes out. But as for this one, the original, this looks great. It still is a great film. There's some great action in here. Some great visuals. So I really do love this film. It's so well put together. Now, talking about some other trivia here. James O'Barr actually wanted Johnny Depp for Eric Draven. That's who he was pushing for. He really didn't want to. He wasn't satisfied with Brandon Lee's hiring at first. But once he got to know Brandon and he saw him act, he was sold. But at first, he wanted Johnny Depp. He didn't want Brandon Lee. Alex Proyas originally wanted to shoot the film in black and white. And even with the color palette in color, it's definitely more mute, more monotone, more, they suck some of the color out of the film. This was all shot in Wilmington. I know I already said that, about 2 hours from my set. River Phoenix and Christian Slater were considered for Eric Draven. Obviously, they didn't do the film, so it went to Brandon Lee. At the end of the day, I love The Crow. This is such a great movie. It had a great soundtrack as well. I don't know how many of you all ever heard the soundtrack, but great soundtrack. I remember listening to the shit out of that when we used to cruise around my hometown of Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. I really like this movie, from the aesthetic to the acting. The action's badass. There's some great explosions. The great soundtrack. The directing is nicely done. So overall, I just really like this film. And this transfer is great on this disc. So I highly recommend it if you're a fan of this film. The 4K is definitely worth the upgrade. And it sounds great. So at the end of the day, I would give The Crow a 9.5 out of 10. 9.5 out of 10 for The Crow. What are your thoughts on this film? Comment down below. Let me know. Do you plan on picking up this 4K? Have you done it already? What are your thoughts if you've watched it? Well, how do you think the transfer looks? How do you think this sounds? Leave that comment down below. I really would appreciate that. All right, that's it for this review, for this video for the Case for Physical Media. But until next time, bye.